I'm going to be sharing a lot of personal information. Maybe you'll find out more about me than you ever wanted to know. Pardon me? Well, there are a few people in the audience that could tell my story better than I think, but I'm going to try to do it. And there's a reason. I'm just not standing here talking about myself. That's not the reason. But the intention for sharing all of this information is that the hope that there will be at least one of you that will be maybe motivated or pushed to take the next step on your healing path. And I can say that because I know one thing for certain. I know that we are all healing from something. Whether it's emotional or physical or spiritual, you can't get through this experiment of life without being wounded. I've been wounded on a number of times on all those fronts. But I'll be talking about one track tonight. So as I'm sharing all of this information, I'm hoping that you will be able to connect your story with mine. And that would be really rewarding to me. So I want you to I want you to listen to me, of course, but I also want you to keep in mind what your own story is, because this is just my story. It's not really any different than anyone else's. We all have a story, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we can all connect. So that's the reason I'm going to share so much of myself tonight. And I'm going to be talking about my healing journey through visual arts. That's my adventure. But when I say, when I talk about art, if you think about that word, when we say the arts, what do you think of? Music, drama, visual arts, dance, that sort of thing. But I think that word can be broadened and defined differently. And also when people say to me, I have no talent. Or I can't draw a stick figure. Well, I can't either. And that's not the point of art, right? But I'll challenge you, and maybe some of you are thinking that, I don't have any talent. Well, let me stretch your mind a little bit on that one too. Because, a couple of examples, let's use cooking. Cooking is a talent. It's one that I don't possess, actually. But, and gardening. Gardening's a talent. And you can fill in the blank. There's a lot of things that we all have a talent. I think the challenge is recognizing your talent and embracing it and then using it to heal yourself and to heal others. And also, I think it's interesting. Let's use cooking as an example. The steps you take to create your favorite dish are the same steps that I take to create a painting. You have an idea of what you want to cook that night. You gather your ingredients and your tools, right? And you mix up your brew and you serve it to those who are in your home or next door neighbor. Same thing I do. I have an idea about a painting I want to make. I gather my tools, I put it together, and then I offer it up. So I'm trying to hammer that into those people who think they don't have any talent. I challenge you, yes you do. Gardening is the same thing, right? The same tools, the same steps are come about to make your end product. So that's a couple of things I want you to think about while you're listening, is about your own talent and your own healing path and how you're progressing on it, right? So here we go with some background. Again, more information than you probably want to know. My undergraduate work was done in fine art and special education. My goal at that time was to work with special needs groups. And I grew up in California, from Connecticut, but I grew up in California. And in fact, there was a model program that had just begun in California at this time. So I was able to do some student teaching while I was in college, but I was a non-traditional student, meaning I was a lot older when I was allowed, I was able to go to college. So I was working full-time and going to school full-time because I was supporting myself. So upon graduation, I was offered a teaching position with this program. So I'm like, this is fabulous, right? This is right. This is what I wanted to do. Though I realized upon graduation that I had quite a student debt. It's a whole other story, right? So at that moment, I thought that the smartest thing for me to do was to stay with this corporate job because it paid more than teaching. It's another story, right? Unfortunately. So I thought, well, that would be a smart thing to do, to pay off my debt. And then I could switch back and get on the track that I really wanted to be on. So the school left the door open for me. And so that was my idea. Now you can probably fill in the blank. What do you think happened? 15, 20 years later, I wake up and realize, wow, I really took the wrong turn here. I was seduced into that corporate ladder situation, climbed up this thing. The job became everything to me. It was all consuming. It was my friendships, my kind of a family situation when you're working in a corporate world. And I don't know about you, but you get, I've gotten to a few times in my life when I look around and think, where am I? Is this where I really wanted to be? Is this what I really wanted to do? And the answer to those questions was no. I was not happy at all. My mind, my body, and spirit were just not connected. I had strayed far from what I wanted to do, so I made a conscious decision, another one of those decisions, that I was going to try to get off that ladder and get back into more of a balance, right? Get back and connected with the creative side of myself. And I made this radical decision to move back to Connecticut and leave everything I'd ever known and just make a big break and try to transition out of corporate. Now, I certainly wasn't financially able to just cut the cord and pretend I'm a professional artist, but I joined a group when I got here. I felt like I was in a foreign land. Coming from California to Connecticut, there's a big difference. But I sought out a group of artists. Does anyone remember Nancy Tracy in Old Saybrook? Nancy had a lovely little school. She taught all ages of art. She was just a real dear. And I became connected with them and a group of artists that on the weekends we joined up together, and Nancy taught me, introduced me to pastels. I had always been a watercolorist, but I hadn't done anything for years, so I'm like starting from scratch again. But I felt good about it. I felt there was going to be some balance going to happen in my life. And over the years with her and with this group, I started to get some skills back. And I still am, but I've always been drawn to faces, and particularly faces that have been lived in. That's a polite way of saying I'm getting old, and trying to deal with my own changing landscape. And I'm interested in emotional work, particularly with faces. It's that moment between thoughts that I want to try to capture, not the smiling into the camera kind of thing. There's a place for that, but that just isn't my thing. So I strive to do these emotional pieces. Now this is the first watercolor pastel I had ever done. That's my grandmother, Lillian, which is another healing story. Lillian's has legs. She's been around the block. And she's the first, as I said, the first watercolor pastel. She was the first entry into a juried show I had ever done. And she took my first gold medal for that piece. Now I did a series of these, not just her, but I did gentlemen too, Mike. And I was getting some traction. Now getting awards for selling is not the goal. It's the recognition, that the confirmation that I was getting, right? That was what was important to me. And I found, I laugh because it's still a humbling experience, I found that I was even showing in New York. Now that's a big thing for artists. Showing at the National Arts Club, the Salmagundi, the Pen and Brush, and again, I'm going to sound like I'm tooting the horn here, it's just these were confirmations for me, right? I was taking top awards in these places. It was like, little old me going into New York, you gotta be kidding. So I was getting a name for myself. Things were, like I said, trying to get some balance here. This is, I feel like I've gained, I'm coming back 20 years from now. I'm gaining it back. I'm getting back to where I wanted to be. And at the same time, as this was happening this took years. It's not like I came here one weekend and everything, I don't mean it to sound like that. It's over years this finally happened. And I received a phone call from the activities director at Chester Village West. And there were a couple of families that were looking for an artist that would work privately with a couple of Alzheimer's patients. And if you've had any association or understanding with that disease, it's very difficult on families. So these families were looking for, just an hour a week to get a little break. Well, look at this, I've come full circle. I'm back to where I wanted to be 20 years ago. So I jumped at the chance, and I'll tell you a little story about one of the gentlemen that came to work with me, Mr. Scheibner, and the family embraces me. It's all right to use his name and tell his story. He's passed on to his next adventure now, but he was a CFO of a large international company. I can't remember the name of it, but you would know it if I had remembered. He was also a jazz musician. I had trouble with those words. And played professionally in New York, with two other individuals. He also was an avid sailor, and he had painted with watercolor back in the day, but at this point, all of that was lost to him. So when he came, he would come once a week, and with Alzheimer's patients, everything needs to be very controlled, and so when his driver would pick him up, he was very confused. But over time, eventually, as soon as they got to my street, he would know where he was going. And so I would have music playing, and I had all these different paintings of boats, sailboats, because he was an avid sailor. I had the palette laid out with all these luscious watercolors, and I would sketch a little, crude little boat for him to fill in the color, right? So he would pick up his brush, and I'd say, pick what color speaks to you today, whatever you find that you're really interested in. He would load up his brush. And anyone work in watercolor? I know a couple do. When you touch the paper, the water, it's a rather essential experience. The paper grabs the paint and it can bloom and move. And each time he would do that, he would go, ooh! It was so joyous. His mind, his body, and his spirit were connecting at that moment. It was just so powerful. And it's been proven scientifically. I'm not one of those people that can talk about that aspect of it, but the color, the music, the interaction, the physical, right? it's all really good for the brain. And he was really connecting at that moment. And one day, his daughter drove him instead of the driver. And she was visiting from Colorado. So we're doing this, and he's doing his little woo, and just, oh gosh, it's so pure. And I looked over at her, and she was crying, because he started speaking French to me. I don't speak French, but I assumed he was telling me how great this was, right? He was painting this boat, and he was just all into it. And she was crying, and she said, he hasn't spoken French in 20 years. Mm-hmm. So there again is another validation of this work, this art therapy that I was doing with this gentleman. So I'm really happy at this point. I can feel that maybe this is something I can, start a little business. Maybe I can have a number of students that I'm working with where I really meant to be. I could feel I was coming together. It was really a powerful time. And I looked into getting another certificate for art therapy and all this. Well, then what happens? Life comes along, and I'm in a head-on collision with a drunk driver, which radically changed my life. The whole hard word, things became very difficult. So at the end result is good, right? I'm here, I'm walking and talking and creating. But to give you a little bit background on the injury, because it's important for the context of this whole talk. My neck was broken upon the impact, and I was paralyzed. By the time they got me to Yale, which was, I guess, I was in and out of consciousness. I guess it was quite an effort. In fact, there's one person in this room who was there. She saw the accident because it kept her from getting home on time. But that was my fault. When they got me to Yale, what was discovered is that when the neck was broken from, I think it's C2, 3, and 4, or 3, 4, and 5, very high, like up by your brain stem. Not only did the bones, they didn't just break, they shattered. So all of these shards of bone were cutting into my spinal cord, and they had cut the, is there any science-oriented people in here? I think I'm saying this correct. The vertebral artery was cut, and there was a blood clot hanging there, which at any second could let go and I would be dead. And they didn't know why I wasn't dead. I mean, they didn't say that to me, but they're all, like the neurologists, the head of neurology is very concerned, and the orthopedic guy is pressuring to have surgery done, and he's saying, no, you can't do any of this, because as soon as you do something, again, here's the end result. I'm here, I'm walking and talking, but my surgeon tells me every time I see him that by all rights I should have died. I should have died from that artery septum. But if I had made over that hurdle, I really should be in a wheelchair on a ventilator. Based on the injury. What is Superman? Who is Christopher Reeves. That's the injuries that I had. So again, mystery. World works and the universe works in strange ways. I'm here for a reason. Reason they don't understand medically. I should not be doing any of this. So I guess it's because I need to be sharing my experiences. I think maybe that's the reason. So, all right, I felt like I was at Yale for a year. I don't really remember in and out of consciousness, time, pain, yada, yada. Surgery happened, pieced me back together. Here I am, I finally get home. Oh my God, that's all I wanted to do was get home. But upon getting home, I realized there's more to this than this physical problem that I have now, trying to teach my body to try to work again, right? I stuttered. I couldn't control my eyes. They darted around. My vision was maybe about this clear and everything else was out of focus. I couldn't read. I didn't recognize words, which, may sound strange, but, I would try to read a sentence and every third or fourth word was like, what is that? And, I'm not reading medical books, this is just regular things I knew I was supposed to know, but I just didn't have it. In my memory, there was big gaps in memory, and that really showed up when I looked at my work. And I had no idea. I knew somehow that was these paintings were mine, but I had no idea how they were created. I didn't understand what my tools were, what my process was. I was falling into a very deep depression. And I didn't see any way out. And one day, a friend, a mentor, dear friend, and teacher of mine, Deborah Quinn Munson, some of you know Deb, she and her husband at that point, they're from Chester, but they were living in Massachusetts at the time. They had moved because of Russ's work. She got wind of what had happened. She came to visit. It was a really bad day that day. She picked the right day and the wrong day. I needed her. I didn't realize how much, and she didn't know what she was walking into. And I had not told my docs that I was having all this trouble. I hadn't told many people. Because, right or wrong, I did not want to go back to the hospital. I had such strong PTSD. I was so terrified they were going to throw me back in the hospital. I was keeping all of this. And, you keep secrets, that's not good for you. Already, I have enough of a hurdle that I'm trying to, climb up this hill, but I'm putting more on myself. I know that now, but then I didn't. I was trying to protect myself. But I did share with them this whole idea that what happened, the terror of that, not knowing what to do and how to get out of this. Crying, like I said, this was a good day and a bad day. It was a bad day for her to come. She said to me, she said, okay, wait. Let's not try to be who you were. Let's take who you are today and move forward. Brilliant. Brilliant. I needed to hear that. There was a tiny little bell that started ringing. Okay, so she said, I'm all propped up in my bed and all wired up, and she brings old discarded paintings. Now a little sidebar for most of us who create, if you're honest enough, you can tell people that out of 10 paintings, you maybe have a half of one that that you can show anyone, right? So I had a lot of discarded stuff. So she brought me all my work and she said, now let's cut up, find a shape that you like or that you can relate to, so squares. Cut up this square in place in a way that I can see them clearly. Cut up a bunch of pieces, and she brought a piece of mat board, and she said, now let's just move these around. Move them around until you feel like that's where you want them to be. We're not trying to make this look like a face, and in fact, all these were discarded faces, right? So I'm cutting up different pieces of faces. So don't try to make it into something. This is just a feeling. When you see, she was doing a compositional study, right? If I had had the memory, if I had been able to access my memory, I would have realized this was a pure art therapy exercise that I had used with Mr. Scheibner, that I had used in the classroom. This is what you do. This is connecting the mind, the body, and the spirit. So that little bell was ringing a little bit more, and this is the first piece I did after the collision. So that's BC, and this is AC, before the collision and after the collision. Humble that it is, it was a beginning. It was a beginning for me. I called it All in Pieces. And also what was happening through all of this, talk about exposure. My story, I don't know how it got in the paper, but it was in the Shoreline papers. It was in the Hartford Current, is that Hartford Current?
It was the fundraiser.
The what?
I think it's from the fundraiser.
Oh, from the fundraiser. There's my fundraiser person. And the New Haven Register, I believe, also. So the result of that was that I was receiving daily cards and letters from complete strangers. It was just overwhelming. All this goodness coming from complete strangers, you know, wishing me well, or they read about it and either had a connection themselves with a drunk driver or someone they knew, or they were just compelled by the story. So I had these stacks, I mean, hundreds of these cards and letters kept stacking coming in. It was just really wonderful. But this bell that was ringing, after doing this exercise, I said, all right, I'm going to step onto my healing path here. This is my first step. I'm going to make little thank you cards and send them to all of these people. These humble offerings. I was going to cut up, you know, a little composition. Sounds very simple to do, but it took me all day to do one at a time. It was exhausting physically to get myself, you know, where I need to go. Exhausting. But I had a purpose. I now had a purpose in life. To get myself out of this deep depression, these cards were instrumental in me moving forward. So it took months to do this. And I had to go back, unfortunately. I had to go back into the hospital. I did have to have another surgery because they missed some bones and bone fragments. And I did finally go to the neurologist and was diagnosed with a TBI. I mean, I guess you all know that. I didn't know it at the time. I kept thinking things were going to get better, but I was diagnosed with a deep brain injury. And all of those things that I said I was having trouble with, those are, they were all connected with the deep brain. Now, someday I would like to have a neurologist standing with me giving this talk because they could talk about the science end of it, you know, what's really going on. I'm talking about the life experience and what I went through. And there's something, I shouldn't even bring it up because I don't know how to explain it, but there was a disconnect between my eyes and the brain. What I was seeing and the brain was seeing were different. But slowly, again, those cards were my lifeline to do those cards. So I ended up, I had the therapist write out a simple thank you that I could try to copy. Because again, reading, writing, all that was a little bizarre. And so there I was. There is my reason to keep going. So I started a little series of these greeting cards that I called All in Pieces. And eventually, step by step, I was able to pick up the brush. I'm sure I don't hold it correctly anymore, but teach myself how to paint again. And my vision was still like this for a number of years. This has been the first 3 years. I still had a lot of problems. I still have some issues, but you know, the brain is an amazing tool. It's a machine. It heals itself in a lot of ways, or it finds different ways to do things. I have workarounds. But I keep saying that I had a purpose. I had a purpose and a reason to get up every day and keep myself moving. So gradually, again, over years, this has taken me to try to come back. Working with watercolor, got a little bit, you know, the images got a little bit bigger. I wish I could work large like this, but I still have trouble trying to keep everything in focus and in line. And I work from life, but not out in it, because it's another one of those things I become overstimulated visually, so I have to try to keep myself a little contained. trying to contain myself isn't easy, but I try. I mean, in order to create, I have to have things, a little contained. But I'm still on the path. I don't know where I'm going to head, or where I'm going to be next. But I've been able to, create work that I can share again and have it recognized. I was able to become elected artist with Lyme Art Association. Before the collision, I was on that path, and then everything got smashed, so I had to start all over again to get in. So I'm proud of this. I've also made it to, I think it's Northeast Watercolor Society, is that what it's called? Anyway, I'm elected member with them, elected member with a lot of the organizations along the shoreline. I'm also have been able to achieve signature member with the Connecticut Pastel Society, the Cape Cod Pastel Society, and Pastel Society of America, which is the mothership of all the pastel societies in the nation. And now this, it's not just horn tooting. These are milestones for me. They're important for me to remind myself. And most recently, I received, Gigi, I'm going to ask you how this is said, Master
Circle of Arts,
Yeah.
International Association of Pastel Society.
There we go. Master Circle member with the International Association of Pastel Societies, which is the mothership of all the. So I mean, this is again. I'm kind of a little embarrassed about saying that, but again, they're not the reason I do it. I don't create to get those things. They are milestones for me to encourage me to keep going. As soon as I try to create something for a show or for a judge or for oh man, it falls apart. So just stay with my emotional way of creating, and every 10 paintings, a half of one I can show. So this is my latest work. This is my latest piece. I'm very interested in trying to get texture in my work. I'm very drawn to oils that are applied in a very painterly way with a palette knife. All right, so what do you think the moral of the story is? I'm turning it over to you now. What's the moral of this story? Or is there anything you want to share? Question?
Perseverance.
Perseverance. Cool. Yeah, I'm using the phrase now. Well, I use that one a lot with Deb. Be where you are now, move forward. Because I still have days that I look at what I did the day before and go, oh my gosh, what happened? How did I do that? And it scares me because I leap back to thinking I'm completely lost.
It's okay, we all do that.
Oh, thank you. Oh, whew, well, all right, thanks, Judy. You feel better.
Well, I think of the Leonard Cohen quote, and I always get it wrong. Ring the bell for freedom, blah, blah, blah. But then it goes, everything shatters, and that's how the light gets in. And I'm thinking the way that your style changed. You went from this portraiture to this elemental thing with the sea. So some light was let in, and maybe you could say something about that.
Back at you.
Oh, I thought I was supposed to stop talking now.
No,
They're
different.
I mean, there's a landscape to the face too, right? And so it really, and this part of me says, well, you shouldn't have trouble. I have recently been able to do some portraits again, so I'm glad about that. I just can't work at that size. But I started doing these little water paintings, the healing waters is what I call that little series, because of the strength and the healing of water that I feel, right? The ocean, I live on the marshes and next to the ocean. There's a lot of healing going on in that water. So it's different, but it's the same, is it not?
Well, it seems to me like you are connected to what you're painting in kind of a mystical way.
Thank you, Renee.
You're welcome, Judy.
You're making me feel good. Well, I hope that's true. I mean, if it's still trying to do emotional work that people will respond to, that's when it really comes together, right? Any other question? It's your floor now.
Could I just ask, what's the year span between this and that?
Okay, the collision was in 2009. And like I said, I still have some issues with what had happened. It took me 7 or 8 years before I could drive. And so working back. So that, they made the portrait?
Yeah,
Between
just
the portrait?
I guess I'm trying to,
Yeah, no,
because the kind of injury you had is huge in terms of a recovery period.
pretty big.
Yeah, pretty big. So it was just,
So this, I can't remember when that was created. I'm sorry, but it was before. We'll just say before. The All in Pieces, so that was 2009.
and Lillian.
Yeah, Lillian, that's the one I can't remember.
Okay.
That was, okay, well, we can try to move back. I moved back here in 95, so that may have been, I don't think I dated it.
I think it's simple.
It wasn't simple. I mean, it took me a number of years before I got to that. I was starting all over again, so, I don't know, add 5 on to that or something. I'm not good with numbers either. I have to go to the bank all the time because oh my God, things get turned around. Yikes, I'm adding instead of subtracting.
Well, I don't mean to talk so much here, but the other thing is you're talking about the process of how painting is healing, but viewing it is healing.
Oh, did they pay you enough to say that?
Not enough.
Thank you, Renee. That's the
It's
hope, right?
it's down at Smilo now, your work.
Oh,
And
yeah.
It's, people are walking by it, and something about what you've been through is getting transmitted through it, and it's really inspiring to be. It's so beautiful.
This one in particular.
You like that, Jen? Thanks. I had fun doing it.
She and Deb have a show down at Smilo.
Oh, yeah, yes, it's at the Smilo Cancer Center in New Haven. Deb Munson and I have a group show. It's, unfortunately, with the protocols, we're not allowed to go see it. It's just, for this patients and their families, and then the hope is that, there's some healing properties, and I appreciate you saying that. I'm very proud of that show there.
Is it, excuse me, because my husband is a patient there. Is it there now?
Yes.
Yeah. Was it the rocks, the healing rocks? No.
Oh,
Was it before that?
No,
Okay.
well, like you say that, there is a painting that has rocks in it. But, no, it's all pretty much water. Mine are all water. Deb's, there's some water and some landscape, but it's in the Smilo Center. I think they call it Smilo Healing Gallery. Again, I have not been there. I'm sad that I can't go see it, but it's a long hallway. So the work will be there until May.
Okay.
So I'm really hoping that maybe the protocols will loosen so we can go in and see it, but thanks for reminding me of that. Okay. Again, thank you for coming. I hope this was interesting, and now you have to go do something.